Got it. Yes, they're sleeping. No.
You mean aside from being four
They're
o'clock in the morning?
sleeping. Almost cooked. Yeah, cooking, cooking, cooking. All
Sleeping
right,
or
guys, we
cooking.
are now live. We are now live. You are watching the Alien Call. My name is Sean Bright East, and we are about to get started. So, what are we about to get started doing? We are about to get started doing brand expertise. I need to speak about brand expertise. So, one thing that we're working through when it comes to being an expert is differentiating between a generalist and a specialist. What is a generalist and what is a specialist? Because as we know, the numbers will definitely change. So, what are some differences? What are some differences and how do the numbers measure up? It's interesting because I was doing a little bit of research while I was putting this together, and it was very interesting because in some forms of employment, formal employment where people work for others, you'll get paid more as a generalist than you will as a specialist. I said, this is amazing. Now, in business, when we're in professional services like we are, you get paid more as a specialist, a lot more, because you really know what you're doing and you specialized in one thing, laser focus, niche down, narrow down, focus, clarity, one thing. But in someone else's business, they would rather hire or pay more to a generalist because you can sufficiently take on more roles than one. So think about this. Think about mentality. Think about your brand. Think about where you want to go as a brand and a business and as an individual services provider. You want to be a specialist because in this space, you will have so much more value to your ideal client. Now, if you are going into an occupational setting, bosses value people who can do a lot of things because a person who can do a lot of things can take over many job roles. So if you ever felt like you were doing everything or doing things that were outside of your job description, that's because they viewed you as a generalist. And they could have fewer employees on the site as long as you were there, because as long as you were there, they could lean on you to do a little bit in a lot of different areas. Now, I've been a specialist for the past, how would you say, about 6 years of my professional career. And I mean super specialist. So there were a lot of times before I left a job that I had, my last job, where I would have a lot of free time, but nobody would ask me to do something that did not fall in my unique specialized job description. That's the difference. I was an expert in what I was an expert in. So when there was free time or there was a lot of different things that needed to be done, but those roles weren't filled by the people who were there, they wouldn't look at me and ask me to do anything besides what my expertise required. So think about that. Think about that as we move into this expertise area, speaking about branding. People do not pay for beginners. They pay for experts. Nobody wants to see the general practitioner anywhere. So you know how you go to the dentist and they've got the receptionist and they've got the transcription person doing the billing and they got a lot of people in the office running around. Those are the people that like prep. They'll prep you and get you ready for the dentist, the specialist to come in. Imagine if one of those people with the scrubs on, who you know belong in a medical office but don't have any business in your mouth, sat you down, put the little thing, the little suction thing in your mouth, and the little hose, the little squirting water in one end and then sucking it out on the. Imagine if they started picking up the tools and utensils and started making their way towards your mouth. Think about what that would look like, what that would feel like. Before they even hit a nerve, it would hit a nerve with you. It would be confusing, frustrating, offsetting, and offensive. Why? Because they don't have any business doing a specialist's job. They set the scene. Generalists generally set the scene for the specialist to come in. And you don't want anyone in your mouth, anyone in your house, anyone in your business, but a specialist. Anyone in your bank account, but a specialist. So you don't pay the general practitioner. Nobody pays the general practitioner. And that's what I want you to take from this slide. Nobody pays the general practitioner. So there is a trajectory, a path of definition on the way to becoming a brand expert. This simply means an expert in your brand or your niche. See, the goal is to make you and your brand one, inseparable, and identified as such. So, what is the process? What is the process? One part, observer. These are people who just watch. They don't know what's going on. They have no clue. That's like you sitting in the dentist chair. You have no clue. You don't really know what's going on. Two parts, student. So the person who goes from observation to learning about, finding out about, enrolling in, making it their business to find out more, do some research. That is a student. There is a time in the student's life or student's path where they transition from student primarily or only to student practitioner, or intern. So now they become a generalist. As they're interning, they're learning the ropes of generalism. They're being taught by someone. Here, hold this, stand here, get that, turn this on. They're learning the tools of the trade in the room and their surroundings. They're not finding out about the intricate details. These are the people who, if you walk up to them in a store or an organizational setting and you ask them a question, they will say, could you wait right here? Give me a moment, let me find somebody, because they don't know. They don't know. They're just there. All eyes, no hands. No hands. And these are the people that are told not to think. Don't try to figure anything out. You're not going to know. If something happens, come get me. If I leave you for a moment, don't say anything. Come get me. So this is like your first day on the job, like a deer in the headlights. And you go from there to three parts or practitioner. Now you are trustable on your own. Now you can walk around on your own, but you can't do intricate detail work. You can't do specialized work. You have no business getting on the certain software. So you're there, you're occupying a role, you may be paid, you know how to do a lot, you know how to do a little about a lot. So you're learning about the different roles. This is what this person does, this is what this person does, and this is what they do. Does everybody understand what this looks like? If you think about an organizational setting, this is the general practitioner, the person who knows how to hold down different roles until the person who's supposed to be there gets there. So if you've ever been on a job and the manager told you to do this until so and so gets here, or reassigned you to another station where that was not your job role or description, but you knew a little about it, you were a practitioner of generalism. And chances are you were not paid as a specialist. You were like a fill in. And they could send you anywhere, put you anywhere because you could hold it down, but you couldn't really hold it up. It's a difference. Now, if you stay on a job for so long or you go through a couple of succession planning situations, then you're put in the place of an expert. This is when people come find you. So you go from not knowing what's going on, hands in your pockets, to knowing what's going on, but hands in the pockets or half on the wheel, or being from the back seat to the passenger seat. Now you're in the driver's seat and you're the only one that really knows what's going on. You are hands on, eyes open, alert, and on call. So this is when they give you a phone. This is when they give you a phone and you're never really off the clock. Now you're an expert. Now your hours might be cut, but your pay goes up. So you work less, you get paid more. Now you don't get paid for what you do, get paid for what you know. Big difference. I want you to think about what it's like to go to the emergency room and what it's like when you get a prescription or a appointment at the specialist's office. Different setting, different noises, different sounds, different smells, different appearance, different people. It's much less people, much less loud. It's usually not in the middle of a high volume area where there's a lot of traffic. That's a generalist office. So they do a bunch of fix them up, slap it together, patch them up, get them out of here. It's different when you go to a specialist's office and they get paid different. And that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about the difference in pay grade and what you're doing in services and service delivery. Where do you want to exist in that scale? Do you want to be seen and paid as an observer, student, practitioner, or expert? So go ahead. If you're on the inside, put it in the chat. Who would you rather be paid as or viewed as on this scale? Good, good. Expert, expert. expert, of course. Good. So the question is, if expert is the obvious answer in professional settings in your own business, why would you think that it's comfortable and acceptable and high ticket to be a generalist and not really be a specialist? Dabble in a lot of different things, but be a master of none. That's what we're going to go through today. Brand expertise. So let's dive right in. An expert is defined by the 10,000 hour rule. What is the 10,000 hour rule? How long does the 10,000 hour rule equate to in years? More people than your spouse and your mother need to know what you do. So if you're a coach, you should be coaching. If you're a speaker, you should be speaking. If you're a teacher, you should be teaching. If you're a consultant, you should be consulting. See, a coach without clients could either be a student, a generalist, or an observer. See, people will take the title of something that they're not doing because it's highly unregulated. But you won't see a person walking around with scrubs in a hospital who says they're a doctor, or they might go to jail because they be impersonating someone they're not. You see, on Facebook or on Instagram, you can be whoever you say you are. And you can actually harm people with malpractice. More people need to know what you do than your spouse or your mother. If you're on your way to expertise. Through that channel we just saw, more people become aware of who you are and what you do. More people are aware of you as a student than an observer. Why? You make your intentions known. Between a student and a practitioner, now you might be given keys, hired, given a position, contracted. And between practitioner and expert, you put on salary as opposed to hourly. Or they only bring you in for high situations that require a specialist. Big difference. Big difference between a contractor and a consultant. Huge difference. Which one gets paid more? Which one gets more respect? Which one do they never say, go get me some coffee to? Which one doesn't have to justify their worth or negotiate their prices? Put that in the chat. Which one do you think doesn't have to justify their prices or haggle over the price? So this is the thing. And I hope you're with me and paying attention to this, because this is the thing right here. If you find people talking, how do you say, challenging the validity of your pricing structure, how do they see you? Put that in the chat. If someone says, oh, your prices are too high. If someone says, is there some room for negotiation with your prices? How do they perceive you if you don't have clients right now? How are you being perceived? People know you exist. People know you exist, but are you perceived as an expert or are you perceived as a generalist? Right, right. People tell you that your prices are too high because they don't think your value is high enough. They don't see you as a professional. So they don't pay you like a professional and they don't treat you like a professional. Generalist versus specialist. So the Merriam-Webster dictionary simple definition of a generalist states that a generalist is a person who knows something about a lot of subjects. So you have an idea about what to do, maybe sometimes if something happens. Maybe we might be highly opinionated, but not highly regarded. Now, a specialist is defined as a person who has special knowledge and skill relating to a particular job or area of study. So when I was in the workforce, I would be asked to come early to deal with something that no one else was qualified to deal with. They might try to fill in before I got there, but when I got there, it was like they could just relax and walk off because now the specialist was present. Now the expert was present and I had it under control. So ask yourself, what do I have under control? What do you have under control? What are you the only person who knows about? What is it about your job, your life, your occupation, and your business that no one can do but you? Or is there anything? And if there's nothing that only you know and only you can do, that's the reason why you're being paid what you're being paid. Simple. And if you want your money to change, then your expertise has to change, which means your information has to change or your education has to change. Or your money, it might change, but it'll go in the wrong direction. Your money will go in the wrong direction because we're moving towards an economy of specialists. Gone is the day where you could just be a practitioner and be safe about your employment. And gone is the day that you can be a generalist about professional services. So you have to get serious. Why does it matter? Why does it matter? So, like I said, in a job setting, generalists may get paid more than specialists who look for a higher position. Why? Because it's beneficial to a boss to have someone who can fill multiple roles. And why is that? Well, if you got a line, a service line in the front line of direct services or a fast food spot or a high volume customer service business, customer service orientation, and you have a person who can do three different things, then you might only have to hire two people as opposed to three because one of the people knows enough about the jobs to get the job done, but they won't get the job done right. If a specialist comes in, they can do it all by themselves. But they won't, because they hold themselves to a higher standard and they're paid in tandem for what they do. So for instance, when you go into a Rite Aid, CVS, and there's one person, they know a little about a lot. They can hold it down until something goes wrong. And then they have to call a specialist. Then they have to call someone who really knows what they're doing. But they can look decent as long as nothing breaks. And that's kind of what people are doing in professional services. They're looking cool until something breaks. They're trying to answer questions with assumptions. They're trying to patchwork. They don't really know what's going on. And that's why in conversations or negotiations, the opposer usually justifies the lack of expense that the so-called professional or the specialist is asking for. And this is the problem. And this is why people can't raise their prices, close clients, have a robust professional service delivery orientated service. Does this make sense? Put it in the chat if this makes sense. Because I want you to understand this. Because when you understand this and you lean into this, gone is the day of not knowing where your next money is coming from, your next clients are coming from, your next check is coming from. Gone is the day where you don't have a job. If you're in that situation where you're working in a occupational setting, you won't be laid off. You won't be in between jobs, and you won't have to negotiate a salary or try to haggle and justify about your numbers. Think consultant. Think consultant. Think about them. Do they have to play about numbers or justify what they're paid? A specialist never has to justify. A specialist is always overpaid because they don't get paid for what they do. They don't get paid for hours. They get paid for what they know. So here's the roadmap. As a novice or an observer, a speculator, a spectator, it's usually 2 years in that I don't know phase. So I can remember when I enrolled in college, I took a generalist title. I got a associate's degree in human services. So human services is a little about a lot. So I went to psychology 101. I did physical anatomy, biology, criminal justice 101. You see, I was skimming the surface of a lot of different things. I didn't go deep into anything. I skimmed the surface. I was introduced to a lot of different disciplines and sciences. Now, it was in my fourth or third year, going to fourth, where I said, okay, and dove deep. Now, and when I transitioned to bachelor's, I made some decision, but it was still general. I said psychology. That's what I started in, psychology, which is a broad field, very broad. There's a lot of different areas of psychology. Just like there's a lot of different areas of coaching. When people say I'm a coach, it's a lot of different areas of speaking. But people say I'm a speaker, and they wonder why they don't have clients. And they wonder why they don't have anywhere to speak. It's because a 2-year-old is a speaker. They speak all the time. And when you say, I'm a coach, they don't know if you're a football coach, basketball coach. They couldn't possibly think that you're an executive coach. And when someone says life coach, what kind of life coach? There's many different stages of human development. Are you a youth coach? Are you a relationships coach? Are you a financial coach? What kind of coach are you? There's a lot. When you say life, it's general. So in the third year, I transitioned from psychology into industrial and organizational psychology. Took that for the next 3 years. Master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology with a specialization. Think about that area of emphasis or emphasis area, specialization in evidence-based coaching. Now, now I'm a specialist. Specialist. The question is then asked, where do you apply your specialization? Is it applied science? My area of application was organizational development and change, as well, or through the dynamic or discipline of evidence based coaching. So I want you to say to yourself, where do I practice? How do I specialize? What is it that I do? For whom? In what context? So I'm going a little bit deeper now. And I told you that I was going to transition and move deeper into evidence based foundational principles of practice. See, we've been talking for a while, and I've been talking, something that was attractive, entertaining to pull you in. And now I want you to be a specialist. I want you to get a good bag, not just a little bit of money. But the good bag, the good money, the good respect, the freedom, the time freedom exists on the side of specialization, not in the dibble dabble generalist orientation, if you will. So I applied the knowledge that I knew to OD and C. Now, now I'm taking two different doctorals, a PhD in org development and change, and an EdD in leadership for change, both of them with the emphasis of evidence-based coaching. Now, this is specialist expert 10 to 15 years. I want you to think, this is not about me. I'm using myself as an example for you to compare, do a comparative analysis and say, what do I have 4, 6, 10, 15 years in? It does not have to be formal education. Let me put that out there real quick. It does not what? It does not have to do with formal education. You could be the mother of a 20-year-old, the mother of an 18-year-old, and lean into the specialization of adolescence. You might have two kids that have gone through adolescence, which means together you got about 8 years of raising adolescents. So if you choose to open a practice or say that you are an adolescent coach, you very well may have that qualification. So think. This is where the critical skills come in, the critical thinking skills come in. Think. What do you have expertise in? What are you a specialist at? Where does the 10,000 hour rule apply to you? Observers are those who spectate and speculate on a topic. They are often your haters. They are often your haters, non believers, and naysayers. What do they say? That's too hard. That's too hard, but that's too long. How long does it take to do that? Nah, it costs too much. What if it doesn't work? Oh, I'm not going to do that, not me. And they're the ones who say, "Are you going to do that? Oh, you're doing that? You don't know how long that takes. You don't know how much that could cost. That doesn't work for everybody, you know." What if it doesn't work? They're on the outside looking in. And that's how we start. We start with speculation, but then we go into milestone 2 or student practitioners. And those are the ones who are studying, learning, getting coaching, interning, providing free services to prove that their stuff works. They're engaged in the work, but they're often under the supervision or leadership of a specialist. So be honest with yourself. And you're working for someone else. When you're working for someone else, it gives you an indication of where you're at in this spectrum. Where do you exist? Because how you do anything is how you do everything. So be honest with yourself. You don't have to put it in the chat. You don't have to tell anyone else, but just write it down for yourself. Are you a generalist or a specialist? Where do you exist? If you're comfortable putting it in the chat, go ahead. If you're comfortable putting it in the documents, in the comments outside of this internal setting, if you're watching this live, go ahead and put it in the comments. Are you a generalist or are you a specialist? Are you a supervisor or do you have a leadership position? How many reports are above you and how many are below you? Do you work for yourself? Do you have no one to report to? That tells you something too. Do you cut your own check, pay your own taxes? Or are these things done for you before you get your check? Milestone 3. Experts and specialists are those who know what they're doing and do not need the instructions and are capable to lead others, commonly known as leaders, bosses, and professionals. And I'll put another one there, entrepreneurs who know what they're doing. So successful entrepreneurs. See, a successful entrepreneur is someone who has gone through those channels. They observed, they looked, they window shopped, they spectated. Then they went in the store, asked questions, found out the particulars. Then they engaged, they got involved. They probably sunk everything into it because it takes a lot to be successful here. It takes a lot. You stay in the practitioner piece for a long time in the passenger seat as a co-pilot, and you're still observing the entire time. So you take the skills with you as you move up, but you don't have the skills of the office ahead of you when you're in the office behind. So people who are observers don't have the skill of the students, but the person who has become a student has the skill of the observer. This is why when you become an expert, you're so highly valued because you have all of the prior competencies. And you're paid accordingly because you can do all of the things required of those offices before you, but you won't be asked to because they hold you to a higher degree. So it's like a bunch of professors and someone who is published. Big difference. Everyone's trying to get published, trying to qualify. The published and distinguished professor is just that. He's distinguished. He can show up when he wants to. You probably won't be able to get any office hours with him, and you'll speak to a TA. What is a TA? A TA is a student practitioner. They are a generalist. Probably, maybe very good at what they do. Very rarely are they paid anything. Where do you fall? Or where do you stand in your brand expertise? So what have you learned? We're going to review. What have you learned and how can you begin to apply it in your business to brand today? What have you learned? And how can you apply what you've learned? We went over a generalist. A generalist does great in someone else's system. As long as they have a job and they keep their competence up, they don't necessarily have to move up. They just need to control their space and their environment and be willing to take on many different roles and wear many different hats. So when you hear someone at a job saying, that's outside of my job description, or they're occupying a space that their job or salary doesn't really require or indicate, chances are you're speaking to a generalist. Or chances are you are that generalist. Or you are perceived as that generalist. Chances are when you get with a client and they start asking questions, they might be perceiving you as a generalist. When you say your price and they are silent or quiet, or they put on a funny face like a dog that hears a high pitched octave, or they can't understand, they kind of tilt their head and look at you, chances are they perceive you as a generalist. Topic 2, a specialist. We also went over this. A specialist is one who requires no supervision, knows what they are doing, certified and qualified to lead, teach, and instruct others. Do you have a supervisor? Do you report to one? Is there a manager who oversees what you do that you have to turn your work into, like a student teacher kind of relationship? Do you walk in and report to no one? Have no one to report to? Are you certified? Are you the certifier? Are you qualified? Are you the qualifier? Are you the teacher, the leader, and the instructor? See, the place you sit in an organizational setting is the same place you'll sit in a school setting. If you put an organizational chart and lay it down flat, it looks like a classroom. It looks like one at the top or one at the front and a lot of different desks or cubicles or offices or titles in front of it, being led by the one in the front. Where do you fall on the org chart? Are you at the head of your own org chart? Because in this case, money flows up and you know what flows down. You know what flows up and you know what goes down. You know what rolls downhill. Topic 3, why it matters. It matters in on this call. If you're listening, watching, tuning in, or on the call, it matters because we are in this space to add value to others and to ourselves. Your perceived value diminishes as a jack of all trades and master of none. When a person starts saying, I'm a this and I'm a this and I'm a this and I'm a this and I'm a this, or I'm a so and so slash such and such, comma, such and such, and your perceived value diminishes. You'll be paid a little. You might get paid. If you're lucky, you'll get paid a little for all that stuff you're talking about. But specialists enjoy more money, more time, more respect, more freedom. They can charge higher prices, position more effectively and strategically, and deliver results. It's the difference. It's a lot of differences. It takes more time, though. See, some people go to school and they stop at a BS. They say, I'm good. I'm good. Some people go to school and they stop at an associate's. They say, I'm good. Some people go to school, they stop at a master's degree and say, I'm good. I'm good right here. They've mastered a certain subject, but they're not qualified really to instruct it yet. That's why it's very few master's degree students at the front of a higher educational classroom setting. They're actually in the seat of a student learning from a master, a real master, or a person who has risen to the role or the acknowledgement of doctoral. So I want you to think in your life, what are you an expert at? Because that's where you should be positioning. That's where you should be hanging your hat or hanging your shingle in business. That's what you can charge the high fees and the really good money for. It might not be what you think. It might not be what you like. It's definitely not going to be what everybody else is doing. And that's where people get caught up. They see someone else doing something, getting paid, and they're like, ooh, I'm going to do that. That's not your specialization. That works for them because they've got 18 years in it. It won't work for you because you just saw a YouTube video yesterday. Now you coming up into a real speaker spot talking about you're a speaker, or a real coach's space introducing yourself as a coach. And you wonder why. You're looked at like you are. And you wonder why you're not attractive in the marketplace. And you wonder why you're the only one in your room and you're the only one having your conversation. So that's a review. What's next? What's next for you? So I've told you about what some of the issues are. What's next for you if you want to become recognized as an expert in your niche market? What's your next steps? Certification, schooling, courses, coaching, and the patience and time to study effectively. That's what's next. If you want to move up the ladder or hopefully out the door of formal occupation, the same way, if you continue to grow, you graduate out of formal education. You get everything you came for and you move on. Same thing with occupation. You get everything you came for and you move on. So, certification, schooling, courses, coaching, and the patience and time to study effectively, practice, and learn what it takes to execute expertly in the field of your choice and the niche of your voice. Don't wait. Start now. There's probably no one listening to the sound of my voice under 20. There's less people listening to the sound of my voice under 25. Chances are most people listening to the sound of my voice are above 25. Which means don't wait. It's never too. No, I'm not going to say that because that's not true. There is such a thing as too late. You're probably not there yet because you're listening and because you're present. But if you wait, it will be too late. So don't wait and start now. Further resources. I wrote a book called The 7 Prerequisites to Success, The Pathways to Paramount Performance. And in the book, I talk about going from a novice to an expert. And I just gave you the definition or the pathway of how I was a novice observer, went through student to practitioner to now expert and still student. Expert professional, 2 master's degrees and 2 doctorates, but still a student. So you never, like I said, you keep the competencies of the offices before you. And as soon as you relinquish those or you put those down, like you've learned all there is to know, the industry changes and you become obsolete. This is why they have what they call CEUs or continued educational units or certification qualifications, where every 5 years, every 2 years, you have to get recertified. You have to go back to the same training again to make sure and refresh or reset the prior studies or standards of qualification and specialization. And when something in the industry changes, you have to go then to be updated. So I talk about that in the first book, The 7 Prerequisites to Success, The Pathways to Paramount Performance. The second book is called The Phenomenal Leader. So that's 31 styles of leadership, learning 31 styles of leadership in 31 days. Now that is a generalist understanding of, it will give you a generalist understanding of what leadership is. So you'll have multiple frames of reference from which to draw your response to a situation in an occupational or professional setting. So you become acquainted with 31 different styles of leadership. And it's written for you to read 1 page a day or 1 style of leadership a day. So throughout the course of a month, you will have gone through all of the different styles of leadership. It is meant to be carried by a professional yearly, every single day. It's like a daily bread. If you read a style of leadership every single day, then by the end of a year, you will have read each style of leadership no less than 12 times. You will be acquainted with multiple different styles of leadership from which to pull to handle anything in front of you dealing with the leadership. Now, the second part of that book is called Executive Coaching for Leadership Development. So that is the specialist part of the book. The first part starts off general, the second part narrows it down from leadership to leadership development. From learning 31 styles to executive coaching for leadership development. And then I teach and speak and have a phenomenal course. And I talk about it in that first link, crickets to digits, how I went from crickets to digits in the midst of a pandemic specifically. So when it was crickets, I was an observer. I was only a student. The money was low. The access to the people and the industry was low because I was perceived as I was. But when I got branded, it went from crickets to digits because now I went from active practitioner to a specialist and an expert. I narrowed it all down to one thing. And if you're interested in knowing what it looks like to go from a generalist to a specialist, if you would like to know how to be perceived as a specialist and an expert in an industry crowded by lookalikes, that's where you need to go. So that's HTTP semicolon 2/bit.ly/crickets to digits and sign up for the masterclass. And then Sean Rice, that's where you get all of the books, you get all of the insights, you can read all of the story and get more resources there when it comes to moving out of a generalist, low paid, low client count space to a space of active practicing specialist in a specialized niche, branded as such, and in a leadership position in your industry and in your niche and field. That's what's next. This is brand expertise. My name is Sean Rice. And I want to thank you for spending this time with me this morning. Early in the morning, 4 a.m. It's an alien call. We're a little bit different. See, no one is a generalist here. Everyone here is either a practitioner or a specialist, an expert, because anything other than an expert doesn't even get up this time in the morning unless they're so low down on the totem pole that they absolutely have no other choice. And their qualifications dictate that someone can tell them, hey, I need you to be there at 3 o'clock in the morning. Other than that, if you're here, it's because you're a practitioner who's looking to become a specialist, or you're already a specialist and you're still humble enough to be in the space of a student. And either one, I thank you. I thank you, and it is an honor and a privilege to serve you. My name is Sean Rice. Take the resources that I've given you, and I will see you next week, same time, on the masterclass, or Saturday on the Leadership Live Deep Dive at 5. Until then, let's grow.